And that opens us up. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Landon Ballard, and you're watching Humans Anonymous. Thank you for joining us again. We appreciate you guys wherever you are listening, wherever you are watching from. Thank you for listening or for watching. And, since it's just me today, I'm going to bring you guys in. How's it going? Yeah? Me too. Anyway, like I said, I'm your host, Landon Ballard. I know it's been a minute since we have been back here. Real quick, before we get started, just want to remind you guys, if you like the content we're putting out, we are doing shows currently for the 2024-25 season. Got some middle schools and high schools booked already. So if you guys are interested in having us come and speak at a school, an assembly, or any group, hit us up on our website right over there. It's www.moi.net, or maybe it's over here, whichever side it's on. But yeah, that's www.moi.net. I got a little bit of a fun, different styled show for you guys today. So we're going to try something different. We'll see how it goes. Camera's down, so I know we're working with a little bit lower video quality. I apologize for that. Hopefully next time we'll be up and running with our good camera. But for now, let's get to it. So I'm going to tell a little bit of a story about someone who a lot of you probably know. This woman is an actress, and she became famous very, very young. And so she started her journey as an actress very, very young. And so I'm going to kind of tell a little bit of her story. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm not going to tell her life story, but just I'm going to kind of talk about some things that I felt were interesting about her story in the way that it relates to recovery and how we go through recovery. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is just not being defined by your addiction, whatever that shortcoming is in your life, whatever you're recovering from. Just trying to focus on not letting that define you, but the positive things, what you've overcome, instead of looking at things in a negative light as, shame on me for having this problem, but rather looking at things of being proud of myself for what I've overcome. And so when I heard kind of the backstory of this woman, it piqued my interest a little bit. And so this is a woman, she started acting very, very young, like very, very young, like by 5, 6, 7 was acting in commercials, was like a child actor, right? And she told stories in a interview that I read from her, where she talked about at the age of, I think she said 6 or 7, was when she started using for the first time. And it seemed normal to her because of the lifestyle she was living. But she said that she would eat ice cream with Bailey's on top of it. And for those of you who don't know, Bailey's is it's an alcoholic beverage. It's a sweet alcoholic beverage. And so at a really young age, just being introduced to something like that, you can imagine how that would affect decision making, how that would affect your perception of alcohol or substances. So at the age of 6 or 7, she started using alcohol. Essentially, the way that it sounded to me was just because it was kind of the circumstance she was in, which doesn't, obviously doesn't make it any more right, but kind of just fell victim to the circumstance she was in and not having, good enough judgment or people around her who were, helping her. And so at the age of 7 is when everything kind of started and progressed there. And in her teenage years and in her early adulthood, she really struggled with addiction. And struggled with addiction for a while. And I guess it took her a long time to kind of realize that, pretty much everything was pivoting on her, extended sobriety in her career. And so very early on as a young adult, she kicked hard drugs. At that point, she developed a hard drug habit, and so having to kick that habit, obviously one of the hardest things that you can do, kicking an addiction. But and here's why I kind of bring up her story, and it's also kind of similar to mine. She quit doing drugs and definitely got her career back on track, and she played in a lot of huge movies throughout her career, was very famous, just did very well for herself. But even though she kicked that drug habit, the alcohol pursued. And that was kind of the same with me early on. I remember when I quit hard drugs, attempting to quit alcohol at the same time, and slowly just kind of telling myself that I can do it, and kind of easing my way back into things. And so I kind of relate to that in the sense that sometimes we tend to keep them separate, but as you'll kind of hear as I talk a little bit more about her story, if you don't nip those things in the bud, they will always eventually come back to get you. And so having beat the drug habit and kind of gotten her life more back on the rails, she started pursuing her career again, despite her addiction. Because at that point, having to get sober from drugs, you're an addict, right? And so she carried that, but she didn't let it define her. She still pursued her career. She still had success. She still did great things despite the fact that she was struggling. And that's what I want to highlight today. Someone who can actively be struggling and still pursuing positive things. I think that that's something that we don't talk about a lot. I don't think it's something that we talk about enough necessarily. And so, yeah, that's what I want to highlight today. It doesn't matter what you're going through, what you've been through, or where you're at. You can still pursue the best thing for you. You can still make great things happen for yourself, for other people around you, despite what you're going through, despite even how you feel. I know that alcoholism can take a toll on people mentally, obviously. And so I have to imagine that while she was going through fame, while she was going through her uprise, sometimes she didn't feel great, but she still made other people feel great. And she, did that through her acting, obviously, but we can do that in many different ways, and so it's a good encouragement for us that even when we're feeling down and out about something that is going on with us, something in our life, we can still find that encouragement of you can make a positive impact. There are still people out there who you can reach, who you can touch. And so just keep pressing forward and keep trying to do the right thing. Just because you're going through something bad doesn't really mean anything at all. So as her career progressed, she continued to struggle with alcohol, got married, and continued to build her career successfully. However, in the background, things obviously weren't going great, because back in 2018, her husband and her got a divorce. I believe it was 2018. It was shortly before COVID. Her husband and her got a divorce, and that kind of spurred for her this new phase, I guess you would say, of her, and she tackled her alcohol addiction. And now being sober a couple of years from alcohol, she's kind of been coming and talking about that. And I think that it's a very important message. I think that it's a great message because it shows that just because you're struggling doesn't mean that you can't still be achieving things, doesn't mean that everything you're doing is worthless. I know for me, I tend to get into that headspace of feeling like an addict, feeling like an alcoholic, and feeling like nothing that I do is good enough, matters. And so I guess my encouragement today for anybody out there who's struggling with that, look behind you. not in a negative sense, not look back, but remember where you've been, remember what you've been through, and use that to encourage yourself, to push yourself to do more. I often, and I think that I'd probably use the word depression. I often slip into a depression, um, dealing with the fact that I am who I am forever, and we all deal with that on different levels. But I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, and that's never going to change, and sometimes that's hard to deal with, and for some people, those attributes, those things that, are forever are very different. But it's hard to deal with sometime. But I guess this episode is just a message to anybody out there who's feeling like that you don't have to be defined by the negative thing about yourself, even if it's the one that you think about the most, even if it's the one that you're working on changing, fixing, improving the most. That's not what has to define you. It can if you want it to, it can if you let it, but it doesn't have to. So when we're dealing with addiction, when we're dealing with alcoholism, when we're dealing with recovering from a divorce, when we're dealing with recovering from abuse, trauma, you have to remember that you are not weak for having to go through those things. You are not weak for suffering. You are strong for having made it through, and that's what or I should say, I forget a lot, is how strong I am for making it to where I am right now, and how lucky I am, because we're all very lucky to just be alive. And so I guess today, as you move forward, I would encourage you to take stock in that. Ask yourself, what am I putting my value in? Am I putting my value in myself in the negative or in the positive? How do I define myself? And I think once we look at that, we can get a better idea of how we treat ourselves. And in turn, I believe that that's how we're going to end up treating each other. But to kind of stay on topic here, to wrap her story up, the actress who I'm talking about, her name is Drew Barrymore. You guys have probably seen her. She's one of my favorite Adam Sandler actors. She played in one of my favorite movies, 50 First Dates, if anybody's seen that one. But yeah, Drew Barrymore, at the age of 6, 7, began using, and until a few years ago struggled with quitting. Did she let that define her? I don't think that I have ever thought of her as an addict or an alcoholic. I've thought of her as a great actress, and that's what she worked hard to become. And so use that as some encouragement today. No matter what you're going through, even if you are still going through it, remember that you're working on something way bigger. It's yourself. So keep plugging away at it, keep pushing away at it, and eventually you'll get to a spot where you can look back and you can say, I'm happy to be here, and that's hard sometimes. It's hard to be happy to be here all the time, and that's okay. I think that it would be ignorant for us to believe that we're just going to be happy where we're at all the time. Sometimes it's hard. So if you're not the best version of you that you want to be today, me neither. Me neither. Don't let yourself be defined by that, though. Be better, but don't hate yourself for the person that you are. Even if I'm not exactly where I want to be, I'm going to love me where I'm at wholly and completely. And that's what I would encourage you today. We love you. We care about you. Tell your story today. Remember that every second that you have is a second that somebody else didn't get. So use those seconds wisely. Make an impact on the people around you. Be kind. And if you see somebody struggling, remember that the person that we talked about today You know, that might be them. Somebody defining themselves by the negative things. You know, somebody caught up in I wish I was instead of realizing I love who I am. So love yourself today. Give somebody else some love today. Hug somebody. Do something for somebody. Do something for yourself. But remember that you are good enough. You are loved. We love you. We'll talk to you guys soon.